Welcome to the Week 7 Waiver Wire Show. Today, we'll be discussing the top waiver wire pickups at each position, including deeper league targets. Be sure to stay tuned all the way to the end, where we will answer your questions from Twitter. Yeah, this was a really bad week for injuries. Obviously, that's going to lead to a lot of different waiver situations that people are going to be contemplating. We also have some news coming in as we're recording this, or just before we're recording this, about guys like Darrell Henderson and Julio Jones getting signed out of nowhere off the street, which we'll talk about here again today. I think the biggest things to talk about are the running back position, starting with the Rams. Now, Sean McVay has a very long history of riding one back. I don't know if that's possible here. Kyren Williams is out at least a week. He has a pretty long history of ankle issues. So I'll say 1 week for now. It doesn't sound major, but I'll say 1 week for now with the caveat that he has had a history of foot/ankle issues. They also have Ronnie Rivers, who was going to be the backup, I think, but he hurt his knee in the game on Sunday. He's going to be out 4 to 5 weeks, leaving them with Zack Evans, who was healthy in that game on Sunday, Royce Freeman, who was on the practice squad, and now they just added Darrell Henderson to their practice squad. Sam, what do you think about prioritizing Rams running backs here ahead of week 7?
Yeah, so I have Zack Evans ranked as my top waiver wire running back this week, but I think he's in a similar tier with the San Francisco running back. So talking about the Rams situation first, I do think Evans is the most likely back that you're going to want to own in fantasy this next week over the likes of Royce Freeman and the newly added Darrell Henderson. Evans has been active over Freeman on game days for the last 2 weeks, and he hasn't been playing a ton of special teams. So I think that suggests the Rams like what they see from him as a running back over the past few weeks. So just given that, and the fact that we know Kyren is going to be out this week, we know Rivers is going to be out the next 4 to 6 weeks, I think you have a good chance of getting a spot start with Zack Evans. And at this point of the season, man, there's, 6-8 teams on bye this week. I think just getting that locked in spot start for a running back, I think, is pretty valuable. So that's what pushes me to Evans over these other guys. We can talk about the McCaffrey injury, the Gibbs, Montgomery injuries as well for some of these other backs. But yeah, that's why I prefer Evans.
Well, let me start here. This is what Sean McVay said. Sean McVay said that the likely starter against the Steelers this week is Zack Evans. But he said we're still working through the plan. And the quote was, obviously you saw Zack Evans get the first carries, McVay said. We've got Royce Freeman on our practice squad, and there'll be some different things that we're in the midst of working through right now. One of the things that they were working through, obviously, was getting Darrell Henderson back. Darrell Henderson fell out of the NFL. 26 years old, was cut by the Rams, was with the Jaguars for a little bit last year, cut. I don't believe Darrell Williams was even in a training camp this year, which is like really scary. So that one is a bit scary to me. Zack Evans, in college at least, I know the prospect bros liked Zack Evans to have some juice. We know Royce Freeman does not have juice. So I would agree with Sam that Zack Evans is the ad. And I'm a little worried, maybe more worried than market on Kyren Williams' long-term ankle. Again, 90% chance probably he's fine in 1 or 2 weeks, but I always worry about these guys with history of a lot of ankle issues. So I think that's good on the Rams. I'm not sure though, or we can at least debate, Sam, whether the priority, if you're in a league, should be Elijah Mitchell or Zack Evans. Now, in a lot of leagues, people are going to say Elijah Mitchell is not owned in their league. That's fine. To me, Elijah Mitchell will be ahead of, in my opinion, Jordan Mason, as long as Elijah Mitchell is healthy. In my opinion, the reason that Elijah Mitchell was behind Jordan Mason this past week is because Elijah Mitchell was inactive for practice on Wednesday, did not practice at all, and got limited practices on Thursday and Friday. Christian McCaffrey goes down. They feel more comfortable with Jordan Mason. Maybe that's too optimistic of a take. I think Elijah Mitchell, because he can give you stuff even after CMC comes back, might be a better ad for people. But yeah, I don't know. You can make the case for Mitchell versus Evans here, Sam.
Yeah, so I'll make the case for Evans. First, a little bit more on Mitchell. I do agree with you that Mitchell is a priority over Mason. I think that's been pretty hotly debated, but I totally agree with your take that Elijah was only behind Jordan Mason because he was banged up. And that's not just us speculating. There's actually a quote from Kyle Shanahan where he explicitly said, and this is the quote, Elijah came back in practice late last week on Thursday. So he only got really one true day of practice in, and that's why JP, who is Jordan Mason, got the first nod once Christian came out. So Shanahan's pretty explicitly saying that Mason over Mitchell last week was an injury-related thing, not because Mason is ahead of Mitchell on the depth chart. So I wanted to start with that. So now why I side with Evans over Elijah Mitchell, Adam, and I think it's close. I think if you want to go with Mitchell, I totally understand it. The reason I go with Evans over Mitchell is because I think if Evans absolutely balls out in a spot start, which is obviously a huge if, he has at least a chance to carve out a big role in the Rams offense alongside Kyren Williams. I'm not saying that's likely. By no means is that likely, but I think there's a chance. Whereas, man, if Elijah Mitchell or Jordan Mason have a big game, I don't see them going away from Christian McCaffrey in just a massive role in this offense when he's healthy. Maybe they could carve out a smaller sort of bit role in San Francisco, but man, we're talking about Christian McCaffrey versus Kyren Williams in terms of running back competition. So that's where I lean Evans. I think you do get the spot start this week and at least a chance of a sustained role down the stretch. But that said, I do think it's very close. If you want to go Mitchell over Evans, I'm not going to call you an idiot for that. For me, I just lean Evans for those reasons.
See, I think that when Elijah Mitchell is healthy, they do want to get Christian McCaffrey off the field a little bit, like 6-7 carries a game for Elijah Mitchell when Christian McCaffrey is healthy. And so I know that's not that exciting to get 6 or 7 carries out of Elijah Mitchell, but it's at least some standalone value, like in a pinch. What about adding Jordan Mason? I think we both kind of agree Elijah Mitchell is ahead here. He's been so injury prone, though. I don't think I would spend a lot of money to get Jordan Mason on my team, but what do you think about him?
Yeah, I think he's certainly worth adding. I'm not recommending a huge FAAB bid, but here's why it's worth adding. Say, through the week, we continue to get limited practice DNPs from Elijah Mitchell. I think that's still possible. He's been battling this knee injury for a while. If he's still banged up going into next week and CMC misses, I would lean on Mason being the guy. So I think right now, I'm assuming Mitchell is back to full health this week, but if he's not, Mason would be the guy there. And I think in a pinch, even if Mitchell does play, Mason should still carve out a 40%, 50% even role there. So he's worth adding if you're desperate for a starter at running back, but not a guy I'm spending more than 10, maybe 15% max of my FAAB on this week.
Okay, fair. The other running back situation is the Lions one, where David Montgomery is probably going to miss the next 2 weeks with a rib injury. Then they have a bye. Not expecting to see David Montgomery until week 10. Do you think that Jahmyr Gibbs has a pretty good chance to get back from his hamstring injury this week? However, will the Lions want to use him in the way they used him last time David Montgomery was out, which was shocking to me? Fullback or halfback dives up the middle to Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, I did not think that was coming. I thought that was going to Craig Reynolds. Now, what'll happen this time? Jahmyr Gibbs is coming off of a hamstring injury. Craig Reynolds threw that block that everyone saw. I'm sure Dan Campbell saw the block and is at full 3.9 inches over it. Sam, what do you think about Craig Reynolds as an ad this week?
Yeah, so I have him below the San Francisco running backs and Zack Evans on the Rams this week. And the reason for that is just with the quotes we have now, I expect Gibbs to be back. Like you referenced in week 3 when Montgomery was out, so a similar setup to now. Gibbs played a much larger role than I expected in the rushing game. It was also Gibbs who was preferred in goal line situations in that game over Josh Reynolds, even though I think people maybe expected Reynolds to get those looks. So yeah, you could make the argument that Reynolds will earn a larger role with Gibbs limited coming back from a hamstring injury. I certainly think that's possible, but I'm kind of siding with the 1 week of data we have on this, which showed that Reynolds did not have a huge role when Gibbs was healthy and Montgomery was out. So I'm not as excited about him as these other running backs. I think he's sort of a limited upside, between the 20s grinder in terms of his usage for week 7 against the Ravens. But certainly I know a lot of teams that are desperate for running back points. I am making some claims on him, but not as excited about him as the other guys.
I mean, the way that it can work for Craig Reynolds is Jahmyr Gibbs either isn't ready to play this week, or Jahmyr Gibbs aggravates, or they don't want to use Jahmyr Gibbs in like a really big role in this first week. And in that case, Craig Reynolds is going to play a lot. So yeah, there's ways that it can go well. I think for Craig Reynolds, we'll just have to see how it goes with Jahmyr Gibbs, I think is the bottom line. Other guys here on the front page, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, you see we are displaying right now the top 10 targets for home leagues. We have Rashid Rice 4th here, and I understand he's probably owned in a lot of leagues, but I think Justin Watson's injury is the key to giving the Chiefs an excuse to unlock Rashid Rice. I don't know why they haven't fully done it yet. He's been so clearly, at least to me, their best wide receiver. You can see it in the targets per route run. I mean, Mahomes likes throwing it to him. So now that Justin Watson is out, and Justin Watson was playing a ton, to me, this is like the moment where I'm like, okay, now I can comfortably or more comfortably take a shot on Rashid Rice here. What do you think about him as an ad?
Yeah, I really like Rashid Rice. I think a lot of people will say he's not available in more competitive leagues, but in your home leagues, if he's still available, I'm making it a priority to get Rice this week. He ranks 3rd in the NFL, not just on the Chiefs, 3rd in the NFL in targets per route run at 30%, behind only Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs. That shows when he is on the field, Mahomes is really looking in his direction. And if Justin Watson's absence allows him to get up from 50% routes to 70%, 80%, that could be really awesome for Rice. And if he performs in a spot like that, I don't think the Chiefs can go back from that once he has a big breakout game. So yeah, you never know with the Chiefs. Like, they'll probably use this as an excuse to get Justin Ross more involved for some reason, but I'm hoping it's Rashid Rice instead. And he's certainly worth an ad to see how the routes shake out with Justin Watson now out.
Yep, agreed. The other wide receiver I wanted to talk about, well, 2 other wide receivers I want to talk about were Jameson Williams and Kendrick Bourne. Jameson Williams only ran 9 routes this past week, but he did get 3 targets, scored a touchdown, looked like he was moving really, really well. I quote tweeted one of the things that Mike Renner put out about Jameson Williams. To me, if the Lions are going to like make an actual Super Bowl run, it's hard to do it with these short passes to Gibbs, Amon-Ra, Montgomery, Laporta. I mean, they need someone out there stretching the field, making big plays. I'm not sure that they're going to ramp up Jameson Williams' role immediately because they're playing so well, but he's still the kind of guy I'd like to have on my team, I think. And then the other one for deeper leagues, I think, is Kendrick Bourne, who with Demario Douglas and Juju Smith-Schuster out, he's done it twice now. I mean, when these guys, when he's had 2 opportunities, he's done it twice, and they've both been pretty good spots. This latest one against the Raiders, but still, it's worth mentioning. What do you think about Jameson and Kendrick Bourne?
Yeah, I think this is like an interesting one where know what team you have and what situation you're in. If you're 5-1, 6-0 even, Jameson Williams is the type of guy I want on my roster. I'm not desperate for wins this week. I know I can't start him for the next couple weeks going forward, but down the stretch, he could be a really high upside option for the fantasy playoffs. If I'm struggling, if I'm 1-5, 2-4, give me someone like Kendrick Bourne over Jameson Williams. I know it sounds gross to say, but you can confidently start Kendrick Bourne much more easily for the next couple of weeks. Even if Juju and Douglas are back, I think we've seen Bourne be the focal point of this offense, get up to 10, 11 targets in some of these games. So that's one where, know what situation you're in. Do you need a starter now versus can you stash someone for the playoffs? But I like both these guys as ads in home leagues this week.
Last one on our home league list here is Devon Singletary. I mean, honestly, Sam, I don't even have a take here because I didn't take a single Dameon Pierce share in best ball. I didn't draft him at all in season long. And I don't think I've played Dameon Pierce once in DFS. I've just been like out on the situation because I don't understand what they're doing. It's really hard for me to understand what they're doing. I believe Devon Singletary went from 0 carries in week 5 to like playing ahead of Dameon Pierce in week 6. That's like insane behavior that I really struggle with. And I just don't know, man. And so I've just avoided it completely. What do you think about Singletary? Again, he played ahead. He outsnapped Dameon Pierce this past week, which was like shocking.
Yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere, right? It was pretty stable for the first 5 weeks with Pierce playing about 50% of the snaps, Singletary closer to 30, 35. And that kind of flipped in the opposite direction this week. For whatever reason, I've heard it speculated that it was a hot hand thing. Singletary came out with a long run in the first quarter and earned more playing time. I don't know. I'm kind of throwing my hands up. I'm not pretending to have a full grasp on what's going on in this situation. All I know is that when a running back gets the majority of the work, the majority of the snaps, they're worth picking up in fantasy football just to see what happens. I have no idea if the Singletary usage is sticky, but he is on bye this week. If you do have a roster spot, where you're able to stash him through the bye. I think he's worth an ad because, man, Pierce has been super inefficient. He's yet to eclipse 3.5 yards per carry in any game this season. I know yards per carry is like a boomer, maybe not the perfect stat. Like, still, if you can't get over 3.5 yards per carry in a single game this season, something's not right for Dameon Pierce. It's probably partially the O-line, but he has not been playing great. So, man, I think Singletary is just an ad, just to see what happens, a wait and see stash.
All right. Let's go to some other best of rest targets here. The tight end position, man. I mean, people are hungry for anything. I made a tweet about Michael Mayer. I didn't think it was going to be a big deal. And next thing I know, everybody is talking about Michael Mayer and talking about in the replies to this tweet because people are so desperate for tight end production. Michael Mayer went from barely playing to ramping up a little bit a couple weeks ago, got all the way up to 67% of the routes in this pass game against the Patriots. And he was clearly featured. I believe it was 3 catches on the first drive for Michael Mayer in this game. And honestly, a pretty tough matchup. I mean, Patriots historically have done very well defending the tight end position. So how excited are you for Michael Mayer at the ultra weak tight end position?
I'm pretty excited for Mayer. I think he immediately kind of comes into the high end tight end 2, low end tight end 1 conversation while we're on these stretch of bye weeks. Yeah, he jumped up to 67% routes, led the team in receiving yards. I do expect that usage to stick and even skew more heavily in favor of Mayer. He's a second round rookie tight end. Austin Hooper, a veteran tight end that hasn't really done much in the league for a couple years. I expect that Mayer will earn the starting role full time down the stretch. And, he was a guy who was expected to go in the first round of the NFL draft by a lot of people in the draft prospect community. So he's an exciting talent, really, really strong production at Notre Dame. He's a guy that if I'm starting Hunter Henry, Chigga Okonkwo, Gerald Everett, if I've been mixing these types of desperation tight ends in over the past couple of weeks, I'm making it a priority to get Mayer because maybe you'll find a consistent tight end starter down the stretch.
Speaking of consistent tight end starter, he's not on this list, but if we go to some of the deeper leagues, you will find Trey McBride on this list. Now, I've been ready for Zach Ertz to just completely get out of here for a while. The Cardinals chose not to do that. They played Zach Ertz a ton the first 5 weeks. However, they've reduced that, and it was about 50-50 between Ertz and Trey McBride this week. Zach Ertz has to be one of the most likely trade candidates at the deadline. I mean, get anything for Zach Ertz. You're rebuilding. There's no reason to have Zach Ertz on the Arizona Cardinals. Get a 6th round pick for him, whatever you can. At that point, Trey McBride could be really interesting. So I know that's not the way you have it, Sam, but I actually think it's kind of close for me, at least, between Mayer and Trey McBride. Trey McBride was a Mackey Award winner, of course, at Colorado State. What do you think about the Trey McBride? Am I getting out of control? Am I too excited for my 20th round Trey McBride bags, I guess, is the real question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's like a crazy take to say it's close. It's still, McBride still just ran 48% of the routes in week 6. So that's not a mark that I'm getting overly excited about. Now, I do agree. I think it's trending in the right direction. I do expect McBride to sort of continue to take over for Ertz, but I thought that at the beginning of this year, and Zach Ertz came in with these insane route rates and target rates. So I'm not willing to call Zach Ertz dead quite yet. I just think it's more likely that Mayer beats out Austin Hooper than Trey McBride fully beats out Zach Ertz. That's kind of the stance I'm taking here. That said, similar kind of bet, McBride and Mayer, a young tight end, high draft capital on teams that should be rebuilding and looking towards the future. I think, especially in deeper tight end premium leagues, if McBride is available, he should be a priority this week.
Okay. On the Bears stuff, by the way, I do think Roschon Johnson will be back this week, and Darrington Evans played so much at the expense of Deontay Foreman this past week. It feels to me like they should and probably will get a big Roschon Johnson workload going here. If he's available in your league, certainly should be added. I doubt that he is available in your league. Anybody else on this list here you wanted to highlight, Sam, in terms of best of rest home league targets?
Yeah, I think Wan'Dale Robinson is worth mentioning. He didn't make the top 10, but he continues to separate from Paris Campbell on the Giants. And look, it's not going to be a high upside roll. It's a low ADOT, but if you're in a PPR league where you could use 6 catches for 50 yards in a week, he can immediately plug into your starting lineup. And then, man, a lot of these other rookies, like Marvin Mims, I do want to mention just because of the Jerry Jeudy trade rumors. It looks really bad for Mims right now in terms of his role. But if Jeudy does get moved and those rumors have been heating up, I think the Broncos will put Mims in the starting lineup. Now, who knows? Maybe they continue to play Brandon Johnson and little Jordan Humphrey and all these guys ahead of him. But you would have to think Mims would move into a larger role if Jeudy gets traded. So he's a guy I'm trying to keep on my bench if I can through the bye weeks here.
Yeah, my Mims take is that in week 5, he fumbled, and then they had a Thursday game in week 6, right? So like on a short week after you fumble, there's no chance your role is going to expand. Where your role could expand is when you play a Thursday game, then you have the whole week off, 11 days or whatever, and now it expands. And then you throw in the Jerry Jeudy rumors. I'm still holding Marvin Mims in some spots. Can't say it feels great, but yeah, I am still holding him. All right. Let's get to some deep league stuff here. Julio Jones, I know this isn't on the graphic, but Julio Jones was signed before, like 30 minutes before we came on this show, by the Philadelphia Eagles. Julio Jones is 34 years old, has not really been good since 2020 or so, 2019. Obviously, he's not going to play ahead of Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown, but he could play ahead of Quez Watkins or someone like that. And maybe that's a role that deep leaguers could attach themselves to. I'm just real skeptical on Julio, and I'm a huge Julio fan, been one of my favorite players in the NFL to play fantasy with. But yeah, what do you think about the Julio Jones signing? And would you have him above any of these guys that are on the deep league list here that we're displaying for our friends on YouTube?
Yeah, so just for the audio listeners, the other wide receivers I have in this list: Brandon Powell, Trey Tucker, Darius Slayton, Tyler Scott. I mean, yeah, it's a low bar to clear. I think you can put Julio in the conversation with those guys. In my opinion, he's not going to be fantasy relevant unless there's an injury to A.J. Brown or Devonta Smith. I just think the wide receiver 3 role in Philadelphia is not that valuable. We know it's going to be heavily concentrated with Goddard, Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown. I think Julio is an intriguing real-life signing. He might be better than Quez Watkins and Olamide Zaccheaus, but yeah, a guy I'd maybe sprinkle a couple dollars on in your deep leagues, but I'm not making a priority to get him off waivers.
All right. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. It's just been so long since we've seen him be able to sustain health and be effective. Okay. Other deep league stuff. The Royce Freeman thing maybe takes a little bit of a hit with Darrell Henderson. I mean, they know Darrell Henderson. I don't know. I think it takes a little bit of a hit there. Also, Keyshawn Vaughn played a ton, or at least more than he has been playing, at the expense of Rashad White, who's been bad. But man, Keyshawn Vaughn is bad also. So any other deep league targets you want to highlight?
Yeah, that Vaughn was the one I was going to bring up. It's just he's playing ahead of Tucker now. He's also been extremely inefficient. I mean, that's the thing with these Bucs running backs. Rashad White has been bad, but these backups have been even worse. So, man, I don't know. It's just ugly in Tampa Bay. The other ones I wanted to quickly highlight, Trey Tucker. He was a 3rd-round rookie wide receiver for the Las Vegas Raiders. Not really a highly regarded prospect, but again, day 2 draft capital is something for a rookie wide receiver. And he saw his role increase pretty considerably in week 6. Hunter Renfrow, who's a trade candidate, was relegated to the bench, and Tucker saw a handful of targets, more routes than he has all season. So again, super deep league, but he is maybe someone worth keeping on your radar. Yeah. Besides that, though, it's ugly in these deep league targets. I don't think anyone else that's worth spending too much time on here, Adam.
One thing that I did notice on this list, the Vikings only allowed 3 wide receivers to run routes in the first game since Justin Jefferson's hamstring injury. Justin Jefferson's going to be out, 4 or 5, maybe 6 weeks. It was every single route was these 3 wide receivers: Addison, KJ Osborne, and Brandon Powell. Now, can Brandon Powell play? I doubt it, but if he's going to run this many routes, and there are going to be games where Kirk Cousins is going to drop back 50 times, like he could give you something. It would be a very deep league kind of ad, I think, on Brandon Powell, but I don't think it's crazy to think that there could be some insane volume games for Kirk Cousins and Brandon Powell runs, 40 routes or something crazy. And that's obviously at least worth considering for deep leaguers.
All right. I think that's a fair point on Powell.
All right. Let's get to some questions before we get out of here. Nirvana says, how much would you spend in FAAB on Zack Evans if you have Kyron Williams? Now, This is an interesting question if you have Kyren, because, as I said, he has a history of ankle issues. It's going to go back to, do you think Zack Evans is actually the man, though? So, Sam, what do you think about how much FAAB? Would you adjust how much FAAB you have, I guess, versus your recommendation in the article if you actually have Kyren on your team?
I think I would tick it up slightly, assuming also that you would start Zack Evans this week if you got him off waivers. If you have, I don't know, Jerome Ford or someone else on your bench to sub in for Kyren, I don't think you have to go out all in on Evans. But if you would immediately plug in Evans to your starting lineup, I would probably increase the FAAB recommendation slightly. I have Evans in sort of the 10 to 20% FAAB range for home leagues. So maybe on the higher end of that range if you know you're going to start him this week.
Okay. From MLB PMAU, he says, would you rather have Roshan Johnson or Jerome Ford as a bench player? I just mentioned Roshan Johnson, how I thought he'd be back from the concussion and be the starter this week for the Bears. Unfortunately, I mean, this team is circling the drain. Although, honestly, man, like, it can't be that much worse than Justin Fields has been for all but 2 games this year with Tyson Bagent, the Division II undrafted rookie. But yeah, what do you think? Would you rather have Roshan or Jerome Ford at this point?
Yeah, I'm taking Jerome Ford in that spot just because of the situation. I think the Bears over the last month or so have been bottom 3 in the NFL in terms of expected fantasy points generated at the running back position. The Browns have been more middle of the pack, and I think if Deshaun Watson can come back healthy, they should be even higher up there. So yeah, it's just a team situation thing. Give me Ford over Roshan for the team situation.
Our next question says, should I drop Jackson Smith and Jigba for Deontay Johnson? Now, Deontay Johnson should not be on waivers. He is an awesome target earner, and he says he's going to be back for week 7 from his hamstring injury. Steelers are coming out of their bye. I also don't want to drop JSN. I thought coming out of the bye, he had a little bit of a better role, ran a route on 80% of the dropbacks, and I think most importantly, he got some targets down the field. I mean, 7.4 yard ADOT is not good, but it's at least respectable for JSN. So I don't want to drop either of these guys, really. But if I was forced to, Sam, I think I prefer Deontay Johnson. What do you think about JSN versus Deontay right now?
Yeah, give me Deontay. I think I have similar thoughts to you. I'm looking to hold JSN in most spots, but if Deontay is on waivers, his target share ceiling is just much, much higher than JSN, in my opinion. So I prefer Deontay there.
Last question we're going to do before we get out of here today comes from Colin. He says, is it time to drop Jahan Dotson? Well, obviously that would be tough to answer without knowing who would you be picking up. But generally speaking, like, I like Jahan Dotson before the year. I took a ton of him in best ball before his ADP got out of control. But my God, it's been bad at earning targets. He's been propped up by touchdowns for now 2 years running. Yards per route run has been flat bad for Jahan Dotson through his first 2 years. It's concerning. It really is. That said, this team could lead the entire NFL in pass rate over expectations. So what do you think about Jahan Dotson and dropping him right now?
Yeah, again, like you mentioned, really hard question to answer without knowing for who. Maybe to make it a little bit more actionable, I think I would drop Jahan Dotson over or for some of these running backs we talked about, the San Francisco guys, Zack Evans. He has just a 14% target share on the season. And I think it's just a Bieniemy thing that they really like to spread out their targets to these 3rd and 4th wide receivers. Curtis Samuel has an 18% target share. Even De'Ami Brown's mixing in a little bit. This tight end usage on the Commanders is out of control with Logan Thomas coming back from the dead to post pretty large target numbers. So, man, I think, yeah, at this point, if you need running back starters and some of them are available on waivers, I'm okay dropping Jahan Dotson for some of these guys.
What about, put your feet to the fire, what about Jahan Dotson or Rashid Rice?
Oof. I think I'd go Rashid Rice there. It's quite close, but I like the upside. I mean, I just have a hard time, like, maybe Dotson has a higher chance of bouncing back to be like a fantasy starter, like a flex starter this year compared to Rice. But if one of them is going to have huge upside down the stretch, I think Rice actually has better odds of that now than Jahan Dotson does. So give me Rice there, but I think it's close.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Okay. That is going to do it for this week's Waiver Wire show. You can read Sam's full article if you do have Draft Kit Pro or the in-season product. You can read Sam's full article on the site right now with FAAB recommendations, etc., etc. We'll be back later tonight with Silva for the team by team shows. We talked about a lot of waiver stuff on there as well. You can get Evan's take there. For Sam, for producer Luke, for producer Steven, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.